Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Enterprising Minds. Dave here.
Alex here, and Ruthi
is on mute.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So today is kind of a grab bag episode. Alex, what do you bring to the table?
Kind of a fun one, kind of a personal story thing. Just asking the two of you on the most creative thing that you ever attempted. So something that you tried that others didn't maybe immediately get, but you were passionate about it.
Cool.
I'm going to talk about AI chatbots, and I want to explore to what extent they can fix bad web experiences.
I'm taking an interest in responsible AI manifestos or AI policy guides that some companies and organizations have recently put out, and wanted to see what you guys think of these things. Are they useful? Are they not? Should we adopt one? So that kind of stuff. So Alex, why don't you?
All right, do the creative one first. Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the one that I picked for myself, and then I'll leave it up to you guys who wants to go and kind of talk about theirs. So long time ago, heard about DARPA, so the defense basically research arm, and they try some really cool and some really crazy things. If you look at some of the past inventions, there's a whole range to them, and they're very sci-fi kind of stuff that they're trying to make into reality. So it's pretty far out there sort of things, not just like, let's get the version 2.0. This is something no one's ever done before. And there was a project that they had created, I'm trying to figure out the date on this, but I think it's like 10, 15 years ago, was basically the idea of cooling people down and how can you do it faster. There's different kind of applications. Of course, it's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, so it's defense related. You're thinking about soldiers who are wearing tons of gear and they're in a hot, humid, potential climate, or just tons of gear and they're just really hot because of all that stuff and running around. What's a good way to kind of cool them down? How can we combat heat exhaustion? How can we deal with things like that? And then, as it turns out with this, it's a little bit further into how can we also enhance people's ability to recover from fatigue? And that's where this cooling mitt thing came from. And we can throw the links in the show notes. But somebody on Instructables started tearing one apart. The product is available. It is, I think, $3,000 or $4,000 to buy one of these cooling mitts. What it is basically like a vacuum jar that you shove your hand into. And you wrap your hand around a metal rod, and the vacuum helps your blood circulate basically faster and bring it to the surface. And that rod gets cold, and it basically works as a kind of a thermal heat pump. And it's supposed to cool you down super fast by cooling down your bloodstream from your hand. It's a really crazy idea. And I always thought, like, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. So I tried building one from this Instructables.
Of course you did.
Oh, man. It was fun going to like random like junkyards and stuff, trying to find parts for this thing, because it's like you just need some random bits trying to make this thing work. Couldn't ever get the vacuum to hold, the pressure to hold well enough. People have done some really crazy things trying to make one. Many years since, there's been a lot of questions of whether or not this thing would even actually work or not. I mean, it's not like it really took off. But it was a fun project, and it was just something that I kept kind of exploring and kind of playing around with. And it was something well beyond my, crafting engineering skills. But it was a lot of fun, and it was just a great exercise in creativity. So what about you two? What's something that you've at least attempted? Maybe you didn't succeed at it, but something that you attempted that was creative and maybe people didn't get the purpose for it right away.
I think that describes most of my career, actually. But Ruthi, why don't you go first?
All right. I'm going to take one perhaps not the most creative. I'm going to have to think about that one. Maybe we'll come back in a future episode. But on the ambitious side, and sort of one that I got definitely a lot of eyebrows raised on, in our previous house, we bought a house with a lot of lawn and a lot of sunny space, with the intent that I would sort of create a garden within it. Definitely a passion of mine, big interest. And in order to do this, right, the question is, how do you take lawn and turn it into garden in an effective way? For a couple of years, I had been watching YouTube videos, this guy named Charles Dowding, who talks about no dig. And he just is like, yeah, just put 6 inches of dirt on it and you can immediately start planting into it. And I was like, that sounds genius. Like, why would you ever do anything else? So I ordered 8 cubic yards, I think, which is a lot of dirt, and had it sort of dumped on my driveway with this huge red truck. And the driveway was on a hill, so it looked like when they were dumping it that the whole truck was going to fall over. Didn't. Everything was fine. And then the process was to put the dirt onto the grass. Lots of eyebrows raised, particularly from my mom, also my neighbors, but particularly from my mom, because she had grown up in a world where, no, you have to dig up the dirt. That's how you have to dig up the grass. You're going to have to pick up all the turf, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have to put plastic down. It's yada, yada, yada. And I was pretty determined. I was like, no, we're going to put dirt down. Now, they did rightly point out that you have to have a way of keeping the dirt from falling down the hill. So they were fair on that point. We solved it with a couple of things. But the dirt thing worked out. And the creative piece of it was, how do you turn that into a garden? How do you think about that? That was probably the process of over a year of me just looking at that space and sort of thinking it through and figuring out where the pathways might go and where you want height and where you want lower spots and how that relates to the sun and the wind, et cetera. I think what sort of stands out about the entire process wasn't that it was particularly out there, creative or anything, right? Putting a bunch of dirt on your lawn, widespread popularity on the internet, like not something new, but it strikes me as something that's interesting within the age we live in. And I had noticed this before, which is being part of different internet communities, watching different YouTubers, puts you in sort of a curious bubble outside of your normal social circumstances. And it gives you sort of a lens and a way of thinking about the world and a way of talking about the world that you share with the community on the internet, but not necessarily within your physical community around you. And then there's a divergence when you're doing the thing that the internet community is all about. In my case, putting 6 inches of dirt on my lawn to create a garden. The people around me who weren't in that internet community, who are sort of have a different way of viewing the world, they raise their eyebrows and they go, that's weird. And so I think this is something that maybe is sort of an undercurrent of a lot of the interactions in our life, which is we have these communities online, which sort of serve as the jumping off point for things that we do or things that we believe. And there's a distinction between maybe the communities that we have in the real world. And sometimes there's a tension there. Sometimes it sort of feeds and has a really cool reaction, right? My mom, now we did the same project in her lawn to expand some of her garden, and it worked out great. But it's just sort of a curiosity that we now live with every day.
That's actually a perfect cue for what I was going to talk about, actually. Because through our conversations in previous episodes, going deep into thought leaders like Clayton Christensen or Rory Sutherland, and the behavioral economics and creativity in general. Those things, as well as a particular quote that's in a book that an audiobook I'm listening to right now called Genius Makers, where it's kind of, it looks at the 70 years of AI building up to the point of where we are now, like where it was just this super niche thing on, punch cards. in, military research labs through to, the early 2000s, when all of a sudden all the researchers had these consulting gigs with the tech companies, or created companies that they then sold to the tech companies based off their research. And one of the quotes from one of the computer scientists who, kind of falls into that professor consultant role, commented on how, they, like Google or Facebook or any of those guys, would purchase these AI capabilities, and then when they would show up to the corporate headquarters to then do the thing that the company bought their company for, they would find computer systems that weren't to their specs. Like they didn't have the GPUs. They were using standard chips. They were, so then the first thing they had to do was to say, hey, all of you that were doing this previously, get rid of what you've done and, do it our way. Cause they just bought us for, $200 million. But the quote was essentially, people are always focused on how to do the thing that they're doing better, rather than looking at a way to change what they're working for a future state, like what things could be capable of. Right. And that's where I think that mismatch of, like the innovator's dilemma, or looking at behavioral economics rather than traditional economics and traditional financial metrics for businesses. And, why are these companies failing underneath good management principles? Well, it's because you're iterating rather than disrupting yourself. Right. The definition of creativity for me has changed, right? Like, I think the knee-jerk reaction to what is the most creative thing would be something like, Jackson Pollock, where, okay, painting was going one way, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's on the scene. And now all of a sudden you can do these, freewheeling expressionist kind of things. And there's this new form of whatever medium it is. Right. But that's not necessarily the case. Right. I think, Ruthi, your example is kind of perfect of creativity can take many, many forms, even if it's just challenging what the knee-jerk reaction would be for, I need a garden. No, I don't have to tear up everything, because you know what? That work sucks. Why would I do that? Just, challenging small things sometimes can give you huge benefits on the flip side. Like I've found myself, anytime anybody comes at me with, well, this is the way we've always done it, I say back to them, great, you have just given me license to do the opposite thing. Because once the culture falls into, this is the way we do it, something needs to happen, because that's just going to be status quo and poor form, moving forward.
Lightning round. You still have to give an example. What is the creative thing?
I don't know. I will have to think of some, because to your point, the definition of it, there are a lot of different ways I could go, right? With the creative writing background, with the music background, all those things are obviously creative. But they're creative in their own medium. So like the most creative business thing. Okay, well, fine. Thinking out loud, the knee-jerk thing that first comes to mind would be back in 2014, I had said to the agency leadership that I was working for at the time and doing the internal marketing for, I said, hey, we're doing all of these like custom events for our top clients, these like breakfast and learn kind of things. Why don't we just record them and, or create courses based off of the industry research we're doing and charge it as a different product line It's a different revenue stream that's more capable. You don't have to, constantly be doing this new business, like, company churn kind of thing. And they're like, no, that's just weird. Why would you do that? 10 years later, that is the exact go-to-market model every single creator is doing. And it's just like, I kind of wish I had the confidence in my abilities that I have now back then, but I think this is the case with any career, right? You see certain opportunities where you're like, man, I should have pushed harder. That's one that I'm like particularly proud of, just because it was the like, okay, yeah, vindication. Cool. I did know what I was talking about. So, Alex, you've been sitting patiently.
Oh, that's it. I mean, it was just kind of a get to know you kind of question. I mean, to be honest, and then just the piece that always kicks off from that, I think, is always those interesting conversations of why you stuck with that path, or why you felt that was the right path to do when others didn't. Or I mean, it's easy to go along with the flow, and it's easy to get peer pressured into things. And when it's the times where you stand against the tide, I think is the most unique. So that was just it.
And it's a skill to be able to recognize, like, oh, this is the time where I'm going to be standing against the grain. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to continue. And with the recognition that sometimes going against the grain, like, maybe doesn't work out so well, maybe. Right. Yep. You end up with scuffed wood, but in some cases, right. In some cases it does make sense. And you just got to stick with it.
One of the biggest learnings from going from the sort of a more creative environment, releasing my first record at 16, through to now being the, traditional marketer kind of role. I've always been shocked at how hard it is for most people to just try something. Right. Because you're talking to my musician friends, it's just hey, you know what? I want to do a project with you. We should do it this way. Or you and I both like this particular artist. Why don't we do a project like that? It might not go anywhere, but let's at least try it. We don't know if we have chemistry or not, but we're friends, so let's try. And then you discover that, hey, you know what? I have a better friend chemistry with you than the musical language. So we're just not going to do projects together. Or, hey, this is really fun. Let's gig with it. Like that. It's such a simple mindset, but just so many people stop themselves from just trying something because they can't see the end of the road, from the beginning, which is, again, one of those management things where it's just like, if you want to be a good leader, you have to like take some risks, Yeah.
I think there's an angle of that too, which is that just getting started and just try it. Mm-hmm. Super simple example. We got these little paper stars. A couple of years ago, I saw in one of those nice little British magazines these lovely little paper star sort of garland things for Christmas. And I was like, that's wonderful. I could make that. And I stared at it probably for a couple months or something like this. And then I finally just was like, okay, I've got a little bit of free time. Like, I'm just going to pull up the YouTube video and make the darn thing. And just sitting down and making it, one, super easy. Two, felt really great sense of accomplishment afterwards. Look, I made a star. That's amazing. But it's I think the thing I always keep in mind is just like how easy it is to drag your feet on the little things like that. Even just watching and replicating a 5-minute YouTube video. That actually takes a fair amount of just inertia to get yourself over that. And once you're there, hey, I've got garlands. I've got lots of little stars everywhere. Turns out you can sell these babies for like $20 on Etsy if you've got 3 of them. It's like really a bizarre niche market. I haven't entered into it, but just for anyone watching, paper stars.
Pay off those
But now
student
that I've
loans.
gotten myself over that hurdle, now I can make little hearts. Now I can make little butterflies, and it sort of opens up a whole new world. Whether or not I want to pursue it is a different question. But I think the more that we do and the more that we just sort of push ourselves to get over that inertia and getting in the habit of doing that, that's a good life skill to acquire.
And try to figure out those barriers. I mean, trying to actually look at those a little bit kind of out of body experience, a little bit third person to say, what's stopping me from actually doing this? I thought about that with cooking. That's always one that always kind of gets to me because I enjoy it. And I used to be very, very intimidated by it because you have these, amazing lauded chefs. And then there's me and my, bowl of mac and cheese or whatever kind of the most basic thing that I'm making on the daily basis or, routine basis. And it's like, my gosh, there's such a gap between me and them. I'll never be able to cross this chasm. But then you realize most of cooking is honestly confidence. Small amount of equipment, small amount of ingredients. Most of it is just confidence. And you can basically tackle about any recipe.
90% of people can solve their cooking problems by not trying to cook with high heat and do it quick. If you let things take time, you can have a good result. Yeah.
I mean, if you chop really slowly, fine, prep it. Set all your ingredients up ahead of time. You'll still be able to make the thing.
Knife skills come with practice.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, if you talk to chefs, and you ask them like, hey, what do you eat mostly? Like when you get home from a shift, they'll be like, I probably have popcorn like 3 days a week. Like,
every chef I've met is always the same thing. I've asked them like, what's in your fridge? And they're like, there was a beer and a thing of mustard. And then they're, just like, I drank the beer. And they're like, okay, just a thing of mustard. Because I eat at work 3 times a day. And when I get home, I don't want to do prep. So I don't do, it's like frozen pizza maybe, or I'll order out. It's like, oh, wow.
Mac and cheese with a bag of frozen peas. Like, yeah. It's like, cool. I'm not alone.
Influencers be damned, man.
God. Well, cool. All right. Ruthi, since you're really good at queuing up my topics, why don't you cover your AI chatbots and then we can go into ethics and responsibility.
Guys, I totally missed the good segue too, because the prime example for mine is Jell-O and cooking. So you ready for this? All right, we're gonna kick it off. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning, thinking about AI chatbots. So I'm going to talk about a bit of an experience I had about a month ago. And then I want to open it up for like, where's the use case for these things? When are they going to be valuable? When are they not? And how can we think about it? So about a month ago, I endeavored for the first time to make dirt cups. For those listening outside of the United States, if you mix Jell-O, Cool Whip, which is like a way of using whipped cream, and this is pudding Jell-O, chocolate pudding Jell-O with Cool Whip. There's probably some other ingredients in there, which I'll get to in a minute. Bunch of crushed up Oreos all together. It resembles dirt, tastes fabulous, and then you can put in gummies like gummy worms into the mix, and then you have a dirt cup with worms, and the children, the 3-year-olds, love it. Fantastic. Okay, so this is what I was endeavoring to make. All right, 4th of July, we're making these things, right? So I thought I had all the ingredients and I would be ready to make it during nap time. We're gonna be ready for the event. Fantastic. I did not have milk. Only had soy milk and almond milk, and I was like, shoot. Because sometimes in baking, it's a 1-to-1 swap, and sometimes it actually matters, and your amounts can really change it. So first thing I did, I was like, let's go to the internet. And the internet said, like, yep, you can sub in your almond milk, your soy milk, but use less liquid. But not fantastic information on, like, how much less. So as it happened, I checked out the side of the Jell-O pudding box. And it said, note, for directions using non-dairy milk, go to www.jello.com. And I was like, sweet, that's awesome. I should have known better. I go to jello.com. And of course, like, there's nothing on the homepage about using non-dairy milk. Like, why would Kraft ever put anything on the homepage about this? related question. Why would they put on the box to go to jello.com? But that's a sort of, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so I'm at jello.com, limited navigation. There's nothing on the homepage. The recipe section was pretty much useless, at least for what I was trying to do. I finally find the product page for this Jello pudding product. Nothing. There is not even a mention of non-dairy milk, right? So I'm like, okay, sweet. That's a terrible experience. But maybe, I'll Google jello.com with like non-dairy milk, right? Okay, found it. Kraft Heinz has directions for non-dairy milk. It's not on jello.com. It's on the Kraft Heinz website, which is another situation of itself. So here I am. I think I find it. Now all of a sudden there's a pop-up. AI Oli. That's their clever name for their AI for Kraft Heinz. It's a play on aioli. Get it? Okay. They have an AI chatbot. And I was like, oh, now I'm on a tangent because I've been interested in this topic. So I go look and I take a look at their about. It's powered by GPT 3.5. And so I'm like, all right, well, ChatGPT kind of knows answers to the questions. I will ask ChatGPT. So I said, I want to know how to make Jello instant pudding with non-dairy milk. I get step-by-step instructions for how to make Jello with non-dairy milk, except that it uses the dairy milk amounts. So it's not even the correct information using the chatbot that is on the Kraft Heinz website. So I go back to the Kraft Heinz website. I find out, I get the exact amount. I make my dirt pudding. So in the end, we got there. But here's the thing. Kraft Heinz has spent, I suspect, a fair amount of money on this project to stick an AI chatbot on their website. They've come up with a clever name. They had clever branding. They had a very curious set of instructions on how to use the AI chatbot. Like, they've spent a lot of time and effort on this. But me, as a customer and as a future customer of Kraft Heinz, all I wanted to know, or all I wanted, was the information that they claimed on the box was on their website. And so I think this, to me, is sort of a classic case of, we try to do cool things on our website, and sometimes that gets in the way of what our customers or what our users and visitors are actually trying to do. And I think there's a tension there. But also, I want to explore the space where AI chatbots can be useful. So that's kind of what I wanted to open up to you guys, is where are the cases and what are the circumstances in which AI chatbots can really improve the user and customer experience on a website? And where are the spots where it's like, oh, that's detraction. That's not helping. That's just something that looked cool to executives.
There's a wide range there. I think one of the interesting parts about that, especially which is from the packaging standpoint, I'm imagining, let's say I'm consulting with Kraft Heinz right now and trying to fix, they got a myriad of problems that you've outlined. But one of them is a content explosion, which I think is something we're all running into. Is it's really, really easy to create content, but there's also packaging out there. There's old vanity URLs. There's expectations that has been set from who knows what event, flyer, newsletter, coupon code, I don't even know, that's out there somewhere. And we need to somehow figure out where all this stuff is, pull it all together, and have some understanding of how on earth is the user experience going to still exist when we have this much content that's out there. And I kind of wonder if, one, it's a chatbot internally to try to sift through all this content to say, hey, find me all the references to non-dairy. Okay, let's get a non-dairy section that actually is useful to people. And obviously, if they're using non-dairy product with this, we should also outline saying, hey, by the way, we have a whole line that's related to this, or you might be interested in this, other kind of stuff. I'm trying to pull that stuff together. And then trying to figure out, okay, from all of our stuff that's out there, what's all the random vanity URLs and links and all the rest that might align to this sort of copy that has this kind of copy around it, or what kind of copy is near our vanity links and vanity URLs based upon all the Google image packaging photos, all the other kind of internal photos that we have. Pull from all that, try to figure out what on earth all these vanity URLs were supposed to be used for. because we can tell from analytics that they came in, but we have no idea what the expectation was. I mean, there's always these like pieces all over there that I just keep thinking of as content. And it's this, how do you organize when you have that much content? The second piece, which I think is really where they're not useful, is if you're, again, part of the Google Labs, you've been starting seeing some of the search generative experience, you go to certain sites and it says, here's a summary of the page. The X button, by the way, does not work. If you scroll, it finally goes away, which Google. But what it'll do is try to give you a very quick summary of this very, very, very long article that might have 20 different points that you're trying to be interested in and learn about, which I searched from something, I landed on the site. What I was interested in is probably one of those 20 things that they mentioned on the site. And Google has given me a synopsis about the random company that happened to create the page. Okay. Again, this is just extra verbose content, not useful. This is not towards my purpose, not towards my intention. This was not towards my original journey that I was trying to get to. It's not giving me to my answer faster. So those two pieces together, I think, create the inherent problem that we have with chatbots, which is they are very simplistic and they don't have a good enough understanding of a customer journey, experience, education level, the kind of content that we do have and don't have, the kind of products and expectation sets that basically our products create, not only what they do and what they serve, but also what they create because of what they're claimed to do or where they're been used. It's not good enough. And that's the problem, is you have like the frustration with customer service. This is that just in text form. It's the first call where you're wondering, my gosh, are we ever going to get to the answer that I'm asking for? And chatbots seem to be just the same thing right now.
Well, and it's interesting because the change in strategy once you go to AI, right, requires that you have one big, massive data set. Yeah. So like, I haven't necessarily heard yet of a company that has like a multi-domain strategy that is also using AI to cover all of them, right? Most of the ones are, I have the single website. It's got all the multiple languages. I've got all the, whatever else that we're training this particular chatbot on. And that particular model seems, at least at this point in time, August of 2023, that seems to be the way that if you want to train these or leverage these tools, especially if you're an enterprise level company and you want to only have it on your particular data set and not necessarily, what the rest of the world is saying, you need to build that. So that's thing one, because that's going to change the way that your content strategy, your go-to-market, occurs. Because that is, if AI is going to be fundamental to your tool stack, you're going to build everything else off of that. And where AI, in my experience, it really has had that benefit, to what you guys have talked about, are the things that are just kind of well known, right? That you may have forgotten about. So those simple tasks are definitely there. But when you pose the question, I immediately thought of an article that Robert Rose wrote based on a discussion he had in the This Old Marketing podcast, where AI's false conclusions might be the best indicator for where an inbound marketing strategy or a content marketing strategy could be beneficial for your particular organization. And the example that he uses is really niche B2B markets companies, like maybe it's a healthcare company that, only does hearing aids or only does a particular heart thing or, whatever it is. If AI is always putting out false information and that AI is being trained on the available data, then you have an opportunity to put out your perspective and have your perspective be the one that trains the bot on your niche topic. So then when you circle back to the new SGE, search experience that Google's doing, or the new Bing chat experience, search experience, your site, your content, your resources will be the ones that will be cited with those generated ones. So that's a really good opportunity, for AI to be additive and still be fundamental without, destroying the jobs, or, it provides an opportunity, a traditional marketing opportunity that we would typically go for. If you take a little minute to, take a deep breath and say, okay, what is this actually telling me? Right.
Related lens I think about is like, with this AI being additive piece, it's like, where and how is it being additive? And I'm thinking about, Alex, some of the things you said about the call center, and Dave, some of the things you're talking about with the niche B2B markets. I mean, this could be true of the B2C as well. And so there's one instance in which we're saying we're going to use some of these new AI technologies to solve for existing customer pain points that arise out of, let's be honest, a lot of our technical debt. So I think about maybe those multi-domain issues where you've got information scattered across, but your customers don't care. They just want to find the information. And so then potentially there is room for AI to serve as the better call center. It's going to be really hard to pull that off, though, because if you're already having issues with technical debt, you might not have the infrastructure that would enable such an AI to solve for it. So that actually might be a challenge that you can't, maybe you can't use AI except in very niche scenarios to solve for that, because the inputs need to be in place for that AI sort of call center chatbot to be successful. The other idea is like, okay, well, maybe AI is additive in the sense that it's creating a new way of engaging with your customers that is distinct from helping me with FAQ type things. And that could be another cool thing. Like, here's a new way you're interacting with your brand, or you're able to have a new experience that you just couldn't with the existing technology. In those cases, though, I think, make sure it doesn't supplant the things that your customers are trying to do. Like, if I'm just trying to find the answer to how the heck do I make Jell-O pudding with non-dairy milk, that is not the opportunity to introduce, we've got an AI chatbot. Like, so finding the right moments for those experiences, I think, is also going to be crucial, to make sure that we're not detracting from good visitor customer experiences. But it's being in the moment. It's responding to sort of the needs and the desires of our visitors.
What if we take it a little bit different? Let's imagine the chatbot's more of a guide.
Yeah.
So we have the world's largest FAQ page out there, and it's absolutely gigantic. Some users will do some kind of Control F find feature to try to get to where they want. Maybe a search engine will just drop them to where they want. But maybe the bot is something that's more useful for guiding us through the pages of the content that exist on the site towards the page that we actually want. So instead of trying to create a summarized snippet sort of response, instead it just guides you towards where you should be going. Maybe fixing a user experience issue that way.
Nice.
Although I think of the times when you are forced into still using call centers, and you get the automated, press 1 for this. And somehow these companies are always updating their menus.
That's my most annoying line. We've recently updated our options. I don't know and I don't care. You wasted 3 seconds.
Maybe if you stop updating your options, I could more easily find what I'm looking for. No, but so when you get into those telephone centers, the good ones will let you press 0 at any time to have that escape hatch to talk to a person, right? Where I get really frustrated is when I press 0 and there's not an escape hatch. And I have the same mentality when I go to a website and I see a chat bot and it automatically comes up. And, usually I just X out of it because I'd rather, try to find it myself. Old habits die hard. But then when I do use the chat bot, I want an escape hatch. Like, design into the bot, connect me to a person, like on the top. So like I can help you. The robot can help you guide, here's our generic articles, or just let me email somebody. Or, Apple does a good job of this. When you try to do their help stuff, you can just, no, put me in a call queue, and let me talk to a real person instead of dealing with your robot. Because there are times when you're so frustrated, you just want to talk to a person who's a cooler head, right? So that's an opportunity, I think, provide the automation, but then there's going to be a percentage of people that just want a person and they don't want the frustration of like, well, here's our 20 articles that might be of use to you. It's like, I don't have time for 20 articles. I want the answer. Right.
I think there's a cool related point there too, Dave, which is we have UX best practices for websites. Now, whether or not companies follow them, different issue, but we have them, right? We sort of know, like, these are sort of good practices. These are things to keep in mind as you're building your web experiences, even as you're building your call center experiences. We sort of know those. When it comes to AI, we are in the experimentation phase. It's total new territory. We don't know yet what the best practices are for AI, which makes this super challenging, because we have to figure it out. And it's going to take a lot of different companies, a lot of different individuals trying a whole bunch of things before we get to a point of like, oh yeah, this is generally a good idea and that's generally a bad idea, which is a weird spot for enterprise companies to be in particular, because you have to make investment decisions and where do you place your bets to make a good experience in that unknown territory.
And a lot of those best practices are just based on what were people's expectation. They go to the site, what's their expectation? Where do they expect the button to be? Where do they expect to find this? But you're right. If general populace basically doesn't have an expectation set for this particular technology, not really much out there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a segue, Dave. Take it into AI policies.
Yeah. So one of the things that hit me when I was first, starting the deep dive into AI, like, many of us have, the Marketing AI Institute is a great resource. I know I've talked about it before. They have I'll put a link in the show notes, but they have a responsible AI manifesto for marketing and business. And this was a post that they put out on their blog on January 28th of 2023. So like really early days, where it was, here are some guiding principles for how to use AI. And when I first read it, I wasn't quite there yet to really understand, what are the potential uses? What are the potential pitfalls of, impacts to jobs, or, how are certain people going to use this versus others? There's always going to be a percentage of bad apples, for lack of a better term. And so I thought this was interesting, where they launched this under Creative Commons. So you can, go through the principles, adjust them as you want. You just have to cite back, that. And I was reminded of it this week because Jasper, another AI tool that's, kind of risen to the top as one of the main, AI tools for people to use. And, full disclosure, I do pay for Jasper, but they just launched a template for AI policies within companies. So it's at least a start for organizations to have these discussions of how are we going to use these? What kind of data is good for us to use? What's the data we don't want it to have, right? Like how much proprietary data are we comfortable, segmenting into this stuff? Because anything can be hacked eventually, right? So I think it's just interesting to me to talk about it because all of them go into, here's some guidelines for responsible AI usage, and we want transparency. We want the tools to be used, in addition to the human capital that is in an organization, not necessarily as a replacement, right? Because there's a lot of pressure for a lot of leaders to just find efficiencies, can we do 75% of our copywriting with AI? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, if you're in a heavily regulated industry, I would say, please don't, use it for ideas, but not necessarily the full copy, right? You should still have that human touch point to make sure that things are right. We've focused so much on creating content over the last 10, 15 years that, the creativity part of it, like what we talked about in the first part, was that hurdle to launching anything, right? We can write a blog post, or we can do 6 versions of a tweet, or, whatever else, boost a Facebook post. That creative stuff was that hurdle for a really nice brand experience. Now, with image generation, with AI that can do video, with all the text generation, the creation of stuff isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is citations and making sure that the output is actually correct, or that it's within your brand voice, or representative of how you actually want to, present your company, your products into the market. So it's more of that copy editing and brand guidelines now that is more of the work for certain organizations. So, some of the principles, and then I'll stop talking to get you guys reactions on it. So this is based off of the AI Institute one. And, we believe in responsible design, development, deployment, and operation of AI technologies. We believe in a human-centered approach to AI that empowers and augments professionals. AI technology should be assistive, not autonomous. And then, we believe that humans remain accountable for the decisions, actions, even when assisted by AI, like these types of things. It goes into, use of privacy, strict adherence to data laws, all of these things. But then at the very bottom, one of the things that I like, and I think more organizations might consider, doing this just as a transparency or how you want your brand to be perceived. There's a section called How We Use AI. And it's just that, hey, you know what? We're consistently experimenting with AI technologies. That's just a good business practice. Always vet your tool stack. And then they list out in bullets. We have a collection of SaaS products that use speech to text, content summarization, outlines, image, copywriting, ideation, but none of the full output, right? How does this line of thinking hit you guys? Do you think more companies should do sort of a data privacy thing in the footer, where they just say, hey, here's our AI guidelines? You see this in some media companies that have already done this with, here's how we're using AI for our articles, for our editorial, just for like journalistic standards. But that journalistic standard isn't a pressure on most businesses, right? They don't have that ethical industry guideline. So I don't know. I'm done talking. What do you guys think? I
think that this ties in so nicely with Alex's last comment, which is why I had said, like, perfect segue, because Alex was bringing up the point about we don't have yet the expectations, or people don't yet have the full expectations. We have some, and they're evolving. And to Dave, your question about, like, how do we see these? How do we see these playing out? And how should enterprise or small businesses start to think about this? I think it pairs perfectly, which is as customers, as visitors, as people, as our expectations about AI evolve and how we're going to use them, that's going to inform how we think about these different policies. I really liked those sort of "we believe" statements because it kept it open. Like, this is what we believe. We're not entirely sure how the cookie's going to crumble on this AI topic, but here's what we believe, and we're going to stand by it. And I think that's a really good way of jumping off into this sort of this new world of using AI as part of the web creation experience. So that's kind of where my mind's at the moment. Is that's a good way of getting the conversation started.
A similar thought. I mean, since we're early stage, thinking about this from like an executive leadership standpoint of thinking about AI, this is a great jumping off point to talk about where are we going to use AI? Where do we see basically the benefit of this? There's a line in it, which I think is helpful for any large organization to post, which is, we believe in the importance of upskilling and reskilling professionals and using AI to build more fulfilling careers and lives. Don't run away. Don't be so scared. We're trying to use this in a way that's going to be helpful. I mean, just statements like that, just try to think through and talk about how are we going to handle this? And the open recognition of when you use AI, that's a really interesting thing. So journalistic standards aside, think about like programmatic SEO and how massive amount of content you can create basically using AI tools. At what point do you say that you've been using this tool? And there's copyright concerns of, if you do or don't. There's also just, do people trust and have, what are their kind of beliefs around the validity or the usefulness of this content if it was built with this? Am I somehow signaling to Google that I'm not following their EEAT kind of policy or, best practices document that they have? That's a really tough line. I mean, that's a really tough point to start playing into, of saying, what do we define as AI and when do we disclose it? And then, I mean, the we believe statements is very helpful also from a legal standpoint, because some of the problems with AI, that are well known, is it has misinformation. It isn't always right. And where it's getting its information is sometimes really opaque. Those things are legally tricky, and having some kind of disclaimer statement is helpful. So this is a great, stepping stone to that, but we still have those same kind of issues that are going on. So it's a useful document. I think of other industries as well, just to tangent one time, is higher ed. It's really difficult from a higher ed standpoint of how does a college handle AI tools? You can assume that a student who is not at their in the classroom is probably using at least a calculator at home, and of course Google, and then also AI tools. You kind of have to create that given assumption this exists, therefore I have to use this stuff. So you would have to come up with a document like this to talk to your students, but also your professors and staff of, this is our expectations. This is where we put our line. We're going to change our curriculum to be more experience question based, to basically make AI not so useful. We're going to teach our students and have them purposely use AI in time and try to take it apart and try to say, okay, what were the flaws? So they can be more educated in its use of it. I mean, there's pick your industry, but you're going to have to wrestle with this question. I think this is a great stepping stone for those conversations.
I think running with that too, your little tangent, but an important one. We're in a transition spot right now. So we know what the expectations have been. We don't know what they're going to be in the future. So we're trying to evolve. And these policy statements are a really good starting point, and they're going to continue to evolve. But I think about your higher education. points, Alex. And one of the things that I'm starting to see are different professors posting curricula on here's how I'm creating a course around large language models and working with them and incorporating them in, which is a very different scenario. It's you are incorporating it into your course, so the usefulness of a policy that students sign, like I remember there you used to have to sign a no cheating policy, right? Is there like an AI policy that students have to sign? That shifts the dynamic yet again. And so right now we're sort of in this curious spot where we know what the old world is, we're sort of transitioning to the new one, but we also don't know what's going to be next. And it could be that what is next looks very different from the world today, such that an AI policy statement, while useful, takes on a very different character.
So would you guys adopt a policy for your own sites? Or would you need more time to think about what you would want to include in it if you did represent it?
I think so, with the perspective of keeping it to the core of, for a given organization or a different given, even if it's just an individual site, like here's what we stand for. And as an extension of that, this is how AI gets played into it. I think that is one that strikes me as a good way during this transition piece of working within sort of the current expectations around AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think internally, absolutely. Externally, it becomes the question. Depends on the industry. Depends on like what exact verbiage you want to pull in. But totally with Ruthi on this one. I think it's a great step forward. And if you had a who we are, about us kind of section, this would be a great thing to have a link to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it becomes a point of differentiation for organizations that, are willing to put themselves out there a little bit. Again, there are industry considerations and all of that. But, when you look at ways to differentiate your brand, to be able to say that, hey, we recognize that this is a business opportunity. We recognize that this is an operations, opportunity. But we want to do things in a correct way. It's going to the same things where, okay, you want to attract the best talent. You want to show that you're, an ethical organization, not only to attract talent, but also make it easier to, get the capital you need to continue on as an organization. Like these are little things that build up to a larger culture of the organization, right? So I'll be interested to see who adopts things and which companies start leveraging this. I think like most new technologies, we'll see it in the smaller organizations first. And just as it's easier to plant a flag for, creators or small businesses rather than the big enterprises. Because I could easily see somebody in a meeting, and in the larger organizations be like, why would we put this out? Because then our competitors will know exactly how we're using, AI. And it's like, if in my mind, I'm immediately thinking, well, if we're using it that way, they are too already.
Collective grown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking okay, and we can also say that we're using Salesforce. Not that anybody's going to know it. Our competitors are probably also using it because it's really popular. Okay. What's so interesting?
If you're a company of a certain size, there's like a 90% chance you're using Salesforce.
Yeah. Don't be surprised by this.
Yeah. And, being the SEOs, how many times have you gone into the source code and then you're immediately going, oh, that's your tool stack. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's plugin built with and all the rest too. I mean, it's
exactly.
not hard to stuff.
Yeah. And just the amount of people that don't even recognize that information is already actually out there. If you're just, if you know where to look, or all the different subdomains that you can find for their mail provider, or yeah. So anyway, this was a fun conversation. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a rating and review for the podcast. It really helps people find us and let us know which episodes you enjoy. And any comments or feedback, we will welcome that as we continue to think on these topics and move forward into the future of them. So appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and we will see you in the next episode of Enterprising Mind.
Thanks.